Here's your stage. Give again big hand to John that he's here all the way from New York today.
Thank you very much. Look, I'm just a guy, right, who's gone through a few changes in my life. And, you know, along the way, I could really desperately try and fit in, right? Whether you're a kid at school, or as you grow up and you're a teenager, and you've all kind of remembered some of that, both the good times and the bad times. And then at work, right, and you dress a certain way, and you show up to a certain place. And all along, I was conscious that it didn't always resonate with me. Right, that expression of bringing your whole self to work is really about resonance, about being authentic, about being you. And I just wanted to be me. I just That's why I love you, Barbara Schmidt. But you know, it's hard to be you in that. Well, that's I picked any office building randomly that I worked in for 19 years. And so I've worked in big places for 30-something years. And there are good things and bad things. But what it's given me is an appreciation for what many people go through. What kind of the limits may be placed by the system, by the people, and by yourself. And so I wanted to work on that. Like, how could I feel better? Because it wasn't about money, and it wasn't about title. It wasn't about those things. Like, they weren't bringing me joy. In fact, I was quite unhappy at various points in my career. So what would it be? And about 10 years ago is when I started to scratch at that, at a particular kind of low point in my career. I'm like, man, there's got to be something else. I literally remember walking around the block saying, I can't do this for 15 more years. I can't. Like, what am I going to do? And you feel almost, as bizarre as it is, you know, because I had a good job and a good company, but I felt trapped. So I started to do some research, lots of popular books about what makes people feel better, what makes people feel motivated, what makes people do what they do. And it starts with some of the basics that you've probably heard before. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. We're all wired, like literally wired deep inside, to want a bit more control, a sense of competence or getting better at something, and a sense of connection to other people, connection to a purpose. And I kept going, and you know, this is from cognitive science, where it's not just like a good tweetable phrase that we want control. Like, it's deeply, deeply wired in us, in that your sense, your perception that you have some kind of control at work is tied to your motivation, like inside your head. And so when you feel robbed of that, rightly or wrongly, but when you feel that you don't have control, I have to dress this way, I have to show up at this place, I have to sit here, I have to do what this person says, systematically you start to feel bad and disempowered. And it's nobody's fault, it's just the way it is. But as I kept reading, it said, okay, there are ways that you could take control back. And this woman talked about job crafting, another phrase I've been using for a while, which is almost no matter what job you're in, you can exercise control, or at least some people do, when it comes to the tasks they did throughout the day, even in a small way, the relationships they had at work, and their perceptions about what they were doing. And so she asked people, how do you feel about what you do? She asked people who were software engineers. She asked people who were mopping the floors in hospitals. She asked people who were nurses, teachers, and so on, people who cooked. Wide range of jobs. She's like, how do you feel? And I, like many people, assumed that, well, there are certain jobs that were a calling, maybe a teacher, maybe a doctor, And there were certain jobs that were a job, like, I don't know, serving in a restaurant or cleaning things. And what she found was not that. It was actually evenly distributed. So that there were some people, roughly a third, that no matter what they did, they tapped into control, competence, and connection. No matter what they did. So, okay, well, that's interesting. How did they do that? And it turns out that it's something anybody could do. And what those people that she interviewed said was, I have a voice, right? The same themes keep coming up over and over again. I'm recognized. I'm me. I'm a human being. I count. Right? It's such a powerful thing. Later, I did some more research on, well, how does that apply to the workplace? Because we have to collaborate and cooperate to get things done. So this was a paper a long time ago, kind of pre-internet, about who cooperates with whom, who exchanges information with whom. And what they found was that proximity mattered, how close we are, right? It's pre-internet. But the reason why it mattered is because when we were closer physically, we tended to share informal information and get to know each other better. Hey, what'd you do on the weekend? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry to hear your dad's sick, and so on. And those kind of micro contributions over time built this sense of relatedness and trust. So it was the sense of relatedness that allowed people to exchange information and collaborate. And then came the internet and showed that we could do that across locations. So that's where Working Out Loud circles were born. Some of you, many of you have been in them. A number of people were in a workshop this morning. Those circles are designed to help people experience this feeling that, look, I choose my goal. I choose who's on my relationship list. I choose what steps to take, small or big. And over time, it lights up those three intrinsic motivators. So we were at Bosch the other day, and some people were sharing what their experience was like in a circle. And if you've been through one, there's no magic, there's no one thing, there's no trick. But some of the people were like, hey, this really changed me, or it opened things up, it made my world bigger. It was the best thing I've done at work in a long time. And some were emotional. And somebody in the audience says, hey, this sounds like a religion. And I said, you're right. The reason why people feel that way is because they're tapping into something that's innately human. Right? That's what it is. And that thing that they're tapping into not only makes them feel better, but the way the practice is set up in these circles, it allows them to tap into the collective knowledge of the organization and to extend their reach so that they can cooperate with more people. What we've seen over and over again is that it's not change management or you're learning the IT skills or you learn how to write more effective emails. Like, yes, you kind of learn these skills in your circle, but something else happens. When it works, something else happens between the people in the group, and when they experience that in the group, they start to see it outside the group in the network that they're building. So there's a gentleman, he works at Bosch, his name is Vincent. He's got a beautiful little baby. We've never met, actually. But we had this nice email exchange, and he finally wrote about that this changes me as a person, but also as somebody at work. And he had this nice quote, which I found so poignant. It helps me be more aware of like who I am and what I have to offer to the people around me, to the people at work. So that improves his chances of creating relationships that matter. And when he does that, he improves his chances, his access to knowledge, opportunities, innovation, which is good for Vincent and it's good for the company. Okay, So now we're going to, that's where we are, right? We've got this practice that looks and smells like work, has working in the title. And in the workplace, we're creating these, and I mean we're creating these safe, confidential spaces where people can develop themselves in a way that's good for them and good for the company, and in a way that could be pretty powerful. So what you have already done, whether you're at Bosch with 200 circles or you're at a place with one, what you've already done is you've somehow managed to create a safe, confidential space at work where you're at least making it possible to feel like Vincent feels. So now I want to go deeper, and so I want to give you a sense of like, well, okay, great, now what? And I want to go deeper in terms of how do we improve how people relate to each other? Like, how do we help them go even further in terms of deepening relationships, deepening the sense of relatedness and trust in an organization? So I've been doing a lot more research since the book and really in the last year or so. And there's a lot of bad news, actually. And it's a great book. It's called Behave. And you can almost think of it as came out this year, as a manual for being a human being. It's about the molecular biology, genetics, and neuroscience of why we do what we do. Right? So it's not a thriller, but if you're standing here, you could read this book. If it was in German, and it's a great book. Okay. So there's lots of bad news, and I'm going to give you some of that. But I promise there's this, spoiler alert. There's an uplifting ending. So, two things. One, the guy who wrote it, by the way, spent decades in the jungle as a primatologist, someone who studies gorillas and baboons, as well as other kinds of research. So he's been studying this for a long time, and what he found was, as social animals, we are wired for us and them. So that's just part of what we do is as we have evolved to have this unthinking process for dividing the world into us and them. And as humans, we do that in all sorts of crazy ways. One. Two, we've evolved, and different kinds of primates have different kinds of social hierarchies. We've evolved to spend most of our mental energy on that hierarchy, where we fit in, who does what, right? Both our own hierarchy, but also other people, which is why that's what even when your brain is supposedly at rest, it is working out how people relate to each other. So the bad news is, this is something called the implicit assumption test. Quick description of how it works. I show you pictures so fast that you can't even, they're subliminal, and you have to, I show you, let's say, a white face, and then you have to just pick the word good or bad, and I show you a black face, good or bad, right? And what they measure is what's going on in your brain, and as well as the latency, how long it takes you to respond. So you've got this implicit assumption, maybe, that people like you are good, you're faster at it, there's different activity. People who are not like you, however you define that, race is the most obvious, but it's not the only one. It takes you longer to hit that button, right? Without you thinking. Like, sorry, you're all racists. Sorry, you all don't like the IT department. Or you all don't like the people in the branch offices. Or you all don't like people who are those young millennials who are on their phones all the time. And so on. Tourists in New York City, they walk so slow. Us and them, us and them, us and them. And we have this nice convenient mechanism that says, I could tell who you are right away. I put you in a box before I even know it. And it's measurable, that's what we do. Bad. Bad for deepening a sense of relatedness because the us and them thing says, I treat the us's better and differently. All right, so that's bad news number one. Bad news number two is hierarchy. So this was Milgram, if anyone ever heard of Stanley Milgram. And long story short is human beings would do horrible things to other human beings if they were told to do it. So we don't even have to go too much into that. But it was anybody that you put in the system, and they would shock people until they had a heart attack. The experiment demands that you continue, but I don't want. The experiment demands, okay, zap! And those people were, they don't do those experiments anymore because those people were scarred afterwards. Like, oh my God, I'm a monster. Yes, you are. Yes, I am. Right? So, okay, my point here, yes, thank you, we're all racist monsters. My point here is that if you're trying to help people collaborate and cooperate, you have to just know what you're dealing with. It's not natural. Okay. By the way, what makes it even worse is not email, but what makes it even worse is that, so what's happening in your brain, right? What's happening in your brain in both of those situations is that it's happening at a very base level. Like if this is your brain, right, this is the cortex, which we have more of than other animals, but this stuff, like we share with crocodiles, right, the brainstem. So this is the oldest part of the brain. So a lot of that stuff, the us and themness and all that, is happening way down here before your cortex can think about it. Now, you're not a slave to those impulses. You don't have to. But in order to work around them, you've got to engage this part of your brain. And that requires effort and attention. Right? So in order for you to overcome the us and them and the hierarchy thing, you've got to spend some of your attention to override that, to like think, oh no, he's actually probably a nice guy, right? But that takes effort. You don't have attention. You have less and less attention. So, boy, the trend isn't good for us to improve how we relate to each other at work. Because although we can, it's going to require more effort, and we're too busy. So we're stuck in habits. We're stuck in a way of thinking, and it's nobody's fault. It's just the way it is. So we keep going. Because to get out of those ruts, we have to expend a lot of energy, and it's just energy that most people don't have. Okay, thanks for coming. Right. Okay, there's some hope. Here we go. Bring us back up. So what this said, they did some fascinating experiments. First of all, when I was a kid, growing up, it was like, well, Hans-Jürgen, your brain's fully formed when you're a kid, and then your brain cells die as you get older, and then you're dead. And it's only, I don't know, past 15, 20 years that they figured out, oh, we were wrong. Sorry, Hans-Jürgen, your brain is quite plastic, meaning it can change quite a bit. So if you lose your eyesight, actually your visual cortex is used to hear better, and so on, so on, so on, right? So your brain changes. Hey, who knew? Your brain changes. And, importantly, what that says is people had compassion training. And compassion training could be as simple as, hey, before I show you these pictures, that same implicit assumption test, I'm just going to do a little something that's going to prime your brain or help you in some way. They did different parts of their brain were active after the training. So what that says is, hey, with practice, it's a teachable thing. It's a teachable thing to override these kind of natural but not necessarily optimal behaviors. And here's this guy. Now, you don't have to be him, but he's known as the happiest man in the world because they measured his brain. His brain is physically different in a significant way than our brains from 30, 40 years of compassion training. Right. So, but we don't have to be him. We just have to take a step. So the big aha here is that, hey, maybe with effort, and I think some of you in the room are experiencing this. Look, I I did my 12 weeks. I've been practicing ever since, and kind of something shifted. Shifted in me, shifted in how I treat people during the day. Okay, how's this going to apply at work? So I was looking for, a bridge to a better culture. Like, what would the bridge be? How would we go from where we are, right, like the usual corporate thing, not good or bad, just the way it is. How would we go to some other place? And here's what I find really fascinating that gives me the most hope. Something called the founder effect, which says that it's from evolutionary biology. So it says that something happens and some subset of genes get stranded somewhere. You can imagine lizards on an island, or in this case, birds carry the seeds of these multicolored flowers, but they only carry certain seeds, and now in this other place, it's an other thing. And in terms of evolutionary biology, that's how new species often occur. Right? And you can imagine a turtle made it to this other place, and that place, and so on, right? So like that's how animals change, and it's called speciation. But the founder effect is what changed it. Like you needed those first seeds in that other place. Okay, so that's how we could change. So if this is us now, here's what I thought was delicious, right? And this gives me hope. So the guy who wrote that book, Behave, and he studied primates. He's like, look, and even Jane Goodall, who many of you may have come across, right? It's not all love and harmony in nature. In fact, it's quite brutal. And if you've seen, there's a beautiful documentary about Jane Goodall recently. It's nasty what they'll do to enforce the social hierarchy. I mean, if we think we're nasty, like they're nasty. But here's what he found. And he wrote it up in this beautiful paper. And what it basically says is, look, there's a troop of baboons, and they were like this, like other baboons. But in this troop, something happened. And the males got wiped out by a disease, most of them. And so with fewer males doing that thing, well, different behaviors emerged, right? And now you had more women around. It was a kinder, gentler baboon culture. And then the founder effect kicked in. So when other baboons from other places, right, that were used to dog eat dog or baboon eat baboon, when they joined this group, they adopted these behaviors because the cooperative behaviors were more effective. So now it's not just about genes, what color flower, how long your beak is. It's about behaviors. You are the founders of the new behavior. So when you think of like, what am I doing and where is this going? Maybe you're 100 people at BMW or Bosch or Siemens or Daimler. Maybe you're 1,000 people. Small compared to the population. But there's hope and evidence from evolutionary biology that that behavior can spread because it's actually a better strategy. What you've heard, I heard Janine did a fantastic workshop in the morning on onboarding. Now, as founders, you spread that behavior in other places. So as the example for onboarding, look, here's a person joins the firm. What normally happens is you quickly get assimilated, acculturated to the way things are in the organization. That's how it normally works. But what Janine's experimenting with is, no, I'm going to have those people experience a new way and become their own little founder groups of 5, right? And then when they go back out into the world, particularly when they're visible and connected, then it starts all over again and it spreads. So that's what gives me hope that, look, this grassroots thing really, like what difference could we make? you can make a huge difference. Because you're establishing those founder communities, and some of them will spread because it's a more effective strategy. And we see each other. So what's beautiful about this, and what Katarina and Lucas and Barbara and Sabina have set up, what the whole group has set up, is you've shown everybody, in genetics it's called the green beard effect, like we could identify who else is in the founder community. That's who's here right now. This is the board member from Bosch, and we're going to talk about this a little bit in the afternoon, who also gives me hope that you go from grassroots to established to institutional. Because in my work at Deutsche Bank, and Barbara can attest to this, like all of our original experiments and attempts were almost like irritants, probably a better word, and the corporate antibodies kind of attacked us, right? Not to be dramatic, but it was, we're trying to be different, and that didn't work. However, what Katarina's done is she's established a founder community, and then she's connected it to the institution. So he says, hey, this thing, people tell me it's good, so she's made it safe for him because she tried this, simple experiment that now she has positive feedback on, and people seem to like it. Done. So now he gets up on stage and he's like, go ahead. And he makes it safe to spread that behavior even further and to accelerate it. We talk a lot about companies. Now I'm going to talk about where we're heading. We talk a lot about companies, like why? Why don't we talk about companies? Why don't we talk about big corporations? Why don't we just talk about some other groups? The reason is, this is where we start. So just at the 8 companies who won that award, you got about 2 million employees. So you have access to 2 million people that you can help, and that give you 8 laboratories, and you know this, Harold, better than anybody, laboratories to work on and experiment and refine, and because they're corporations, they can fund it and make the movement sustainable. So that's what, it's not all about corporations, it's just about corporations first, so that we get access to people, we get access to feedback and learning, we get access to funding to make the movement sustainable, and then we keep going. So I was just talking to, last night, to Heidi Deppner. Is Heidi here? Hi, Heidi. About another practice we're going to develop for next year that allows people, if you've been, how many people here have been in more than one circle? Right. So some of you may be wondering, like you, Magnus, like, now what do I do? Like, what's next? So we're going to work on what's next. Because we're going to, again, take this early results, improving how people relate to each other in the workplace, and then we're going to keep going so that you could take that even further, how you relate to yourself, and how you can accomplish even more as a network. So some of the stuff you do in week 11, we're going to take that even further. And then you go outside of companies to, there was, Katarina introduced me to somebody who's doing work with refugees who want to become, it's a new place. So think about onboarding times a million, right? New country, new company, new place. How do I get connected? Think about anybody who's looking for a job. Or think about people who've been out of the workforce for whatever reason. Anyone who's disadvantaged, really. Can you help them earn access themselves? Can you help them use this practice and the other practices to come so that they don't just feel better at a Daimler or a Siemens, but they feel better kind of wherever they are, whatever their stage in life? Because, once again, it comes down to the big 3. You have a little bit more control, a little bit sense of competence, getting better at something, and a sense of connection. When you lose that, I was talking with someone doing a project in Spartanburg where one of the companies has a factory. there's a high rate of people in jobs in Spartanburg, South Carolina, who just are not happy. So what happens? Well, back to the social hierarchy, back to baboons. When baboon number 2 loses a fight, what does he do? He beats baboon number 3. So people lose their job or otherwise have diminished status at work. Domestic abuse goes up. They beat their wife. Right, so this isn't, it's not a game. It's not a funny 3-letter phrase. It's like we're going to help the planet be a little kinder and gentler, starting in the workplace. We're going to change how people relate to themselves, to each other, and to the work that they do. And that's going to unlock a lot of benefits, including business benefits, but absolutely personal benefits. This is the last thing. After 700 pages, the guy who wrote that book says, by the way, it's complicated. Like, thanks. I could have written that, at the beginning. Because there's no one thing. That was his point. It's not like, oh, this gene or this neuropeptide, oxytocin is the key. We're just way too complicated for that. So there's a lot going on. And anyone who has kids, if you try and, carrot and stick, no iPad time unless you do this something, right? It's like way more complicated than that. But what's the alternative? So we're going to try. And what you're doing is you have the courage, just by your physical presence here, you have the courage to make the attempt. The attempt to make a difference for yourself. Please start with yourself. The courage to make a difference for yourself, for your colleagues, for the people around you. And if we do that, and do that in these numbers, right, we're going to take that founder effect, and we're going to expand and expand and expand. Thank you very much.